My name is Tamar Yastrab, and I'm a junior in Stern College studying computer science. As sort of a growing millennial, I've become increasingly interested in how data analysis that has just increased dramatically over the past 10, 20 years will affect my life and the lives of my peers. Data sources are growing much larger and more complex, as we know, but there's very little that's known about the algorithms that are gathering and sorting these data, this data especially by large companies that are utilizing data to recommend different information to us. I would like to specifically focus on how this affects the political world. And recently, different companies like Facebook and Twitter have come under fire for producing really outrageously radical or even factually inaccurate data to very targeted audiences. That means that specific media coming from political areas are being shown to specific people, and oftentimes not everyone is seeing the same thing. And this can have really, really dramatic effects on how we form opinions. And this is especially prevalent to younger voters who are very impressionable, specifically through social media and just online resources in general. I would like to specifically focus on how rhetoric is used both in search engines analysis and interpretation of data, and how that is also used when we search for things. What words are we using, and how is that impacting what we see? So first, let's just ask sort of the important preliminary questions, which is, what data is being shared over the internet, right? Obviously, there are millions of websites, articles, and videos that are available for us to view and to click on, but no one person can see all of these things. So what influences the position of a given news source in your search results or in your newsfeed? And where do advertisements, right? This has been sort of the hot topic. Where do ads fit into this? So what are you seeing first, just based on content, and also sort of based on how much maybe advertisers are paying? How does this influence their position on the screen? Again, I would like to specifically focus on the appearance of political articles, videos, and campaigns that deal with both fact and opinion. So sort of the intersection between those two things, because that's a really interesting and important area to focus on. While each big information sharing company has its own specific algorithms that it's using, there are certain key elements that underline all of the big companies. I'm going to focus mainly on Google, YouTube, and Facebook as sort of prime information sharing companies. But I'll give a sort of broad, high-level overview of how these algorithms work. So right when you're scrolling through your Facebook feed and you're asked to sort of donate to the up-and-coming candidate, right? Why are you being asked to donate to that candidate as opposed to the incumbent's campaign? Or if you've been like binge watching one, political channel on YouTube, I don't know if you guys have done that. I've definitely done that while studying for classes, right? Why does YouTube recommend a totally, a different channel that you've never seen before? And what are the effects of those recommendations? So there are 3 steps, basically, that companies generally follow, and these are search engine companies, to take in your data, to sort through it, and to give it back to you. And I want to take a look at these 3 steps a little bit more closely so we can get a sense of what's being taken off the internet and how that informs what's being given back to us. The first step are these spiders, and spiders are automated bots that scour the internet looking for new or updated information. So right now there are millions and millions there's tons of data available on the web. So every single day there are new websites and new articles being published, but different websites are also updating information, right? And I think there are 20 plus million new text or text things published on the internet every single day. And this should not be a shocking number, right? Because we think of, let's say, new clothing being added to clothing websites, your new Facebook post, that new YouTube video description. Every single day these things need to be added to, let's say, the Google database. And so we need really efficient bots that are going to gather in all this information, and they work by taking the HTML or just however you've programmed your website, taking that information and taking the text that's in it. And there are really cool problems that we need to deal with, sort of how to most effectively take in this data. And sitemaps are really important for websites to publish. Sitemaps will catalog all of the pages for any given website. So for example, if I'm searching for, water bottles, and in Amazon's cataloging, they have a page for water bottles, and that's included in their sitemap, that will likely be queried up as a search response for what I've searched. Language, obviously, is the most important thing here. So you want really clear descriptions so that all the words that are describing what your content is will be picked up by the bots, stored so that it can eventually be given back. So Google actually recommends to websites that rely heavily on photographs and videos that they should really include descriptions in their HTML to make sure that this content is also being included. Once we have all of this information, it needs to then be sorted. And that happens in a process called indexing. Indexing, right, is how we process all of this data. And that, in general, happens in 3 distinct steps. I'm going to talk about the Google model now. The first step is parsing. So you have, let's say, all these HTML documents, and you need to figure out what are the titles? What are the most important things for the users to see? What's the content? Are there photos? Is there imagery? Is there a graph? Are there links to other websites? All of this needs to be parsed. And also, there are cool problems in this also, right? Say there's a typo in the text, or there's an error in the HTML, right? Your parser needs to be able to pick up on these things and maybe even still give you the results, trying to infer what the author meant. In addition, right, let's say we have all the information parsed. We need to then barrel or organize the information. And the way barreling works, the basic idea is that we want to take the data and sort it into smaller areas that are linked by concept. Okay, so if I search Barack Obama on the internet, if my search engine was now going to go and look at every single page that has ever been published, that would be like incredibly complicated. It would take a long time and take up a lot of time and a lot of space. And we don't want to do that, right? We want to be fast and we want to be accurate. So it might look at a few barrels. It might look at the Barack Obama barrel, maybe the president barrel, maybe the Michelle Obama barrel, whatever it is, but a smaller subset of information to look through and get the most relevant information. And I'm going to give you an example of how this works. So this is a sentence that I wrote. PyData is a fun event. Great. And let's say that information is parsed. Google will give each word a word ID. These are fake ones. These are just random numbers. But every word will get an ID. And that's going to be stored on a table. This table is called lexicon in the Google phraseology. And the 3 most important columns of this table is the word itself and the word ID. So for example, PyData probably is not a word in the dictionary, but it'll be given a word ID, as well as the hit list. And the hit list is going to store how many times that word appears in the document or in the page. And this is really important because we're going to sort that list by the hit list and see what are the most important or the most commonly occurring words. And based off of that, we're going to place the web document or the text into a barrel. So if the word Barack Obama appears a lot of times, we're going to say, okay, I know which 3 barrels or which 10 barrels this needs to go in. So that's also an important thing to realize. The same web document can go in a number of different barrels, but it's not going to be put in, right, something that was mentioned only once or something that's not so relevant to the overarching theme of the text. Once everything is sorted into barrels, the barrels themselves are sorted. And this is really important. So we're going to look at the hit lists now within the barrel itself and try to organize within that category which pages are the most relevant. And this helps us a lot because now when a user comes to search for Barack Obama, we have the most relevant and important text sitting right on top. And we can give those out to the user really quickly. So great. This is sort of how parameters are taken in to the search engines, right? We're going to take the data that we're looking at really every single second, trying to update, and then we're going to organize it. But the big question is, how is that data given back to us? And now these algorithms remain quite elusive, and companies do this on purpose, right? They want to remain competitive, and especially because of all the heat that very prominent social media companies have been given recently. No company really wants to reveal exactly what it's doing with your data. I think this is really interesting. I think that a lot of users don't understand how much of their privacy they're leveraging in order to use these free web applications. But hopefully we can gain some insight today as to what's being used to give us our SERPs, which is the search engine result pages. There are 2 main qualities that any algorithm is going to look for when thinking of what to query up as a response. The most important one is number 2 here, relevance, right? We want to take the keywords in your search and find the pages that most accurately respond to what you've looked for, but also you want to have a high quality page. So to give you an example, if I search for what the weather outside is, if I'm given a page about like a conspiracy theory about how the sun is really a light bulb or something, so that might be very relevant to what I'm looking for, but it's probably not a high quality page. Whereas like if I search that same thing, like what's the weather outside, and I get like a really high quality article on the cotton industry and all of its ups and downs, that might be a very reputable article, but it's not going to be so helpful to what I'm looking for. So we want to find a balance between these two things. So let's look at the first quality, which is quality, right? We want to make sure that the pages that we're giving back to our users are really good pages. And Google in specific really focus on links to try and figure out how reputable is this website, is this text. Right, why does this work? Let's say a lot of research papers are published and they're all citing the same research paper. We can assume that original research paper is a good one because it's being commonly linked to, it's being commonly cited. So websites are going to work in the same way. If a lot of different papers are corresponding to the same one web page, we can assume that that web page is actually a good one. In addition, they also will look at if we have already a pre-established good website that's linking to your page, we'll think it's good. So if Yahoo links to your article, Yahoo's very reputable. They would only post something that we know is a good article, so we're going to give them higher attention. So I'm just going to briefly sort of explain this equation, how we page rank. That's the name of the process that Google uses to figure out the quality of a page. And it looks like this. So we have some dampeners. We can ignore those for now. Those are just going to make sure that the PR, the page rank function, always averages out to 1. So in any closed system of web pages where they're all linking to one another with backlinks included, we want the average page rank of all of those pages to be equal to 1. And then what's inside, what terms are we looking at? So all of these T terms, those are all of the pages that link to your page. Okay, so let's say you're all websites and I'm my own website. If you all point to me, you're all my Ts. And thank you, because now I'm going to be more reputable. Each of those pages has their own page rank, so that's going to be considered, divided by the C function. The C function here looks at how many other pages you're pointing to. So if you're all pointing to me, but you're all also pointing to one another, that's going to mean like none of us stand out so much, and that'll be worse for my own page rank. I don't know if this bothers the mic. Great, so we're going to, let's understand this a little bit further. Also, you can see quite obviously we're defining PageRank with more functions of PageRank. That seems to be a conundrum, but the way this works is it's going to, if we make a matrix with all of the links of the different articles, we can try and determine like the eigenvalue of the matrix, the registries, so we can approximate what the page rank would be when they all average out to 1. So just looking at an example, let's say we have 2 pages and write a simple case, they only point to one another. Oh yeah, so in general, Google uses the D as the dampener to be 0.85. We can talk about why they choose that number, but we're going to use it right now for the example. If the only thing that points to page A here is page B. So we're going to take page B and divide it by 1, right? Because the only thing that page B is pointing to is page A. So the C of page B is 1. And if we just guess right now, just for the sake of argument, that the page rank is 1, if you look at the bottom over here, so we see that that actually makes sense. The page rank of A, if the page rank of B is 1, we're going to have 1 divided by 1 times 0.85 plus 0.15. That's going to be equal to 1. The same thing is true, right? If now the page rank of A is 1, we can just substitute that right into the page rank of B equation, and they're both going to be equal to 1, right? The averages of 2 1s is 1, and that works. But had we started off with a different value, and again, I'm saying right now guessing, we would not guess. We would put this into a matrix and try to solve it. What we would do is iterate through each time. So make a guess at what the page rank of B would be, input that into the function for the page rank of A, and then take that result and put it into the B. And then based off of our results, we see that the average of those first 2 numbers is not 1. So we're going to move it up a little bit more. Take the result for B, put it back into A, and so on and so forth until we approximate closer to the average being 1. Right? If you really overshoot, you're going to see that the values are going to go down. If you undershoot, the values will go up. And eventually, in a closed set, where only A points to B and B points to A, the average of the page ranks should be 1. But if you look at a more complex case like this, and here the math is already done, please look up this paper. It's excellent if you want to see this for yourself. Where we see like page C, a lot of pages are pointing to it, it's going to end up having a higher page rank, but the average of all of these is still 1. So we're looking sort of at a statistical model of this, and that's how page rank is going to be calculated. Yeah, great. The other thing that we want to look at is, so that's all for the quality score. PageRank is going to give a quality score. We're also going to have a relevance score. And there are a lot of really interesting and fun variables that go into determining the relevance of a given page. I'm just going to look at a few interesting variables, but there are an estimated 100, like a few hundred to a few thousand, depending on the complexity of the search engine. So we can estimate that Google has within the low thousands of variables that it's going to consider when determining which of those websites to pull out of its barrel to match your search. I'll just talk about some of these. So your user history, right? If that's going to be really important towards determining which results to query up. So if I search like food near me, and every time I search that, I choose like the lowest cost option, slowly, I'm only going to see the lower costing websites. Previous performance of advertisers or content providers. If we all search for music and we consistently don't choose a specific artist, that artist is going to have a lower relevancy score and appear less frequently and not as close to the top. The number of ads available to be shown or content, right? This was taken from a paper that spoke about ads, but it's true for content as well. This is sort of a motivating factor. So we have like a linear amount of things that we can show a given user. We have an order top to bottom, and we can't show everything. So even if roughly things have a similar relevance or everything matches the keyword exactly, we can't show everything together. So we need to decide an order. Obviously, the time of day is really important. If I search for the weather, I want to see the weather right now, not tomorrow, not yesterday. The advertiser's location obviously is important. If I'm here and I want to Google fun things near me, I don't want to see like a ski resort in Alaska. That's not going to be so helpful. Match between pages to be visited to the search item. So let's take that same example, right? I search fun things to do near me in the summer, and there's a ski resort in New York. That's great, but the pages that are not matching my search term because I said summer, and that doesn't match with winter. And there are a number of other ones, right? Match between the advertisement to the search term, my location as opposed just to the advertiser's location. These and many others are going to go into determining the relevance score. So again, there's a combination in these algorithms of relevance and quality, and those are going to determine what I see. Now, it's important to note that these results are both individualized and deterministic. And what that means here is that your results are going to be subject to your specific assumed circumstances based off of those variables that we've seen. But at the same time, there's a program that calculates them. So I just did this with a friend of mine on Saturday night. I was hungry, so I searched like where to eat near me, and I saw results that were for dinner that didn't close. I searched this at 9 o'clock. They didn't close until 11. They were all within walking distance of my building. My friend was in Melbourne in Australia, and I said search the same thing, and right, she saw breakfast cafes because the time difference that were near her. So the results really are individualized, and we know this, and that's helpful to us. However, there's no one sitting on the other side of the screen, right, trying to guess at this person wanted this last Wednesday. What do I think they're going to want? This is like baking a cake, right? Take the ingredients of all of your data and feed them into these programs. So hopefully that takes away the fear factor. I know like my mom is like, oh, how does Amazon know what I want? It's not like someone sitting there and conspiring. It's just an algorithm. So that's great. I want to speak now about how these, focus really on how these programs are very reliant on rhetoric that's used both in the search that you're entering into your search bar, as well as the content of the media itself. So just briefly to speak about how advertisements are ordered and how they're sold. So we're going to look at the Google system, AdWords, but other companies also have similar means of selling advertisements. So what happens is advertisers participate in mini auctions where they bid on keywords. So if I'm a hair salon, I'm going to probably bid on hair salon or barbershop, maybe hairstyles or haircut or highlights, depending on what my service is. And depending on how many other people are bidding, I can, the price for either click per 1,000 or price per click will go up or down depending on the other people who are bidding. And all of those have to have a relevancy score. So I could bid, really, really high amounts, but if my product is not relevant to the user's search, it's not going to appear. Our takeaway from here is that what I search is going to have a direct correlation between what results come up. So I could search something like, Barack Obama or something really nasty and put his name in there. And those results might bring up different things, but depending on how many people are searching with similar rhetoric, the same basic idea, that's going to determine certain things about the search results. And this has severe implications for politics. I think the clearest example, speaking about how click-through rates are really relevant to what you're searching. So click-through is every time you have a search result, if all of us in the same room, and let's say not all of us, but like 1 million users, click on the same article linked to the same search, that article is going to come up more than any other. So if there was like an NBA game last night and 2 million of us searched, NBA game last night, if there are 2 articles written, one talks about the technique of a point guard and one talks about, this player has a drug addiction, a lot of us are going to be more interested in the drug addiction article. And that's going to slowly push up the relevance score. So now when more people type in NBA game, that's going to be the article that takes the top slot. Now, other journalists might pick up on this, and so they might write an expose on the article or interview other players or fans, and that's going to become all of the news that appears when you search for the NBA game. And that article about, the point guard's technique, that might be relegated to a search about point guard techniques. And so what should be an equal playing field no longer becomes an equal playing field because of our similar search patterns and how our clicking affects the relevancy score of a given page. Right, and now all these new articles that are speaking about that, the big story, they're going to all link that original article, and the page rank is just going to keep going up. And this has really significant implications for the political sphere. If the same articles are being clicked on about a given campaign, politician, issue that's being searched for, the relevancy score is just going to continue to go up. And there are going to be new links made between what I search for and what you've clicked on, you being millions of users. And that's really, really significant. A good question that we need to ask is it actually true, right? If it's the case that my Google searches are now reflecting your preference, the general you, and recommendation algorithms are going to pick up on this, right? So YouTube is going to start giving us the most clicks on video, even if it's not like the most directly correlated to what I searched for, right? These results become more biased or influenced by other people's recommendation. Research is not so clear that increased exposure to a given candidate or article actually correlates to increased favor. However, it is clear that if you're in a social group that all has the same political opinion, you're more likely to agree with an article that you saw about them. Also, on these pages, I've linked the DOI, which is like the ISBN for research. So if you, I encourage everyone to look it up and to do your own research. This is pretty interesting. So you might see like a radical article, like saying something that you did not think was intuitive at all, and you're like not so sure what you think about it, and really you just want to like look at pictures of your friends' dogs, so you're not paying attention to your political Facebook feed. But then maybe you're at work and someone shares that same opinion. Now you're statistically more inclined to say, oh, no, yeah, this is a real thing. That article I saw was factually correct. And if this is happening, let's say everyone in this room is basically like, we're all friends, we're like interested in the same things, so we click on the same YouTube videos. And maybe a few of us like search some politician and we watch their video. Now the rest of us are going to be recommended that same thing. So it's kind of all in our heads. And if one of us in the same digital social circle shares an article about that same candidate, we're all more likely to say, oh, this guy thought it was legit, like it probably is. That's really interesting because it's not based off of merit, it's based off of popularity. And obviously more and more people are getting their information today from online sources and digital media. So like when TV started becoming more popular and they were more commonly owned, so this really changed the game. There was an upsurge of political campaigns being televised. And we would think maybe this social media outbreak and phenomenon would have similar results, but in fact, we see it's much more severe. Firstly, right, as accessible as televisions were, if you have a computer or a phone, you can see information much more quickly, and it's much more accessible to you. But more than that, you're still painting with broad strokes if you just have a TV campaign. You can kind of guess at what the average American would want to see, but all Americans are going to see it that have a TV. If you're using recommendation algorithms and you're targeting small pieces of the demographic that are statistically inclined to agree with your message, you're able to target their newsfeed. And Facebook and YouTube, and until recently Twitter, allowed you to do that. So like we're targeting much more specific demographics, and that can severely influence the political opinions that are going to be made. So if you're in a digital social group and everyone is sharing similar pages, you might never even see the other side, even if what you're searching for is in theory not a biased search. And this is a huge implication. So the CTR, the click-through rate that I mentioned before, will directly increase, we've mentioned this basically, the relevance of a given website. So the more it's clicked on, the higher it'll be in your search results. And that obviously is a really cyclical process. So if you're clicking on something, that's going to become important. More people are going to see it because it's higher, even more people will click on it, and it'll raise even higher, and this process only continues. So I'll tell you sort of why I became interested in this, and why I think it's really important to look at sort of how the search engine, the makeup of the search engine influences how these political opinions are being formed, and the political and psychological research done on similar topics. I was in a class, I'm going to keep this very apolitical, but my professor was like really talking about how great the Green New Deal is. So I don't know so much about it, but he really was like, this is the best thing ever. And he had a very, I thought, dramatic way of challenging the class. He said, does anyone think there's a price too high to pay to save the world? So that's a really interesting argument to make in favor of this paper. And so I, not even knowing that much, but having seen some articles, wasn't specifically trying to challenge the Green New Deal. I raised my hand to that question, which was like, whatever. But I said, like, I don't think that people, not everyone who opposes this paper opposes it because, you know, they think it's so horrible. They just think maybe there are more economical ways, maybe there are different ways to approach the climate issue. And some people in my class turned around and they were like, Tamar thinks climate change is a hoax. That's not what I said. But this rhetoric is not, you know, this is not a special story. And I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but it shouldn't be crazy to us why this is happening. If this is a true phenomenon where click-through rates increase your relevancy score, if you're a smart journalist, you know that if you have sort of like a hot topic, or you can use some strong rhetoric that'll increase your click-through rates, you know, you should be more inclined to use stronger language and maybe enticing or attractive phraseology, clickbait as it's called. And you want the bots to pick up on this language that will slowly become the top results in people's news feeds and in their search results. And strong rhetoric oftentimes can lead to really radicalized conversation. And if you've seen the word, you know, evil, horrible, crooked, I don't know, all these words that are thrown around in the political sphere, anyone who challenges you, they're really going to be, they're going to be radical in your mind, most probably. And this is crazy. I mean, that's, I think, directly what caused my event, and I don't think this is exclusive to me. And this, obviously, I'm sure you read about and heard about in the news, but it's important. So sort of a broader question that I want to ask, just sort of trying to sum and think about this, right? If it's true that using radical speech can actually increase your exposure to users, and you're able to even target users that are inclined to agree with those messages, we have to ask, like, if you're only seeing parts of the story, and these programs are designed for you to only speak part of the story as they exist now, who's doing the wrong thing? And this is like a symbiotic or symtriotic maybe relationship between companies that are giving out media, users who are benefiting from this media, and these search engine companies that are making that connection and benefiting off the result. So we have to ask, if us as users, are we customers or are we commodities? Because we're seeing more of what we want to see, right? Different news companies, journalist outlets, they're reaching more of their demographic. They're getting more of the users that want to see their information, and Google or YouTube or Facebook is benefiting off that pairing. And these companies are incentivized to have users be interested in what they're seeing, because then users will spend more time on the websites, they can charge more for ads, and don't forget that also these advertisers are using these same algorithms to get you. And so this is like a really intense problem, but no one's unhappy with it specifically. And we want to maybe ask, is this the best practice as a room of data users where, like, fortunately, a lot of us or a lot of you are being very innovative in terms of what we can do with data. It's an important question to ask, like, what are the real implications? How much is this going to impact our political future? And I think it's so cool that it's voting day today because a lot of voters, hopefully you all, and a lot of young voters are going to be informed by these political articles that they're seeing and hopefully make informed decisions, but the cards are kind of stacked against them. There are questions of government regulation being involved in this process. Obviously, in the past few weeks, Facebook and Twitter have visited Congress and have really been put under scrutiny, questioning if this targeted demographic system with considering these variables and increasing relevancy scores as they do is actually the right thing. So if you have answers to these questions, please let me know. I think it's been great to sort of realize how the search engines are influencing the psychological and political papers. I am hoping to model this in some formal way. There have been some interesting, like, preliminary studies trying to analyze, like, the proliferation of clickbait. But if you have ideas on that, I would also love to hear them. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask.
We have time for questions.
Great.
So I think that's a great diagram. And it's like, it's nobody's fault, but here we are, and it kind of sucks, right? So what do we do about it? And it seems like that system you described is just sort of like an equilibrium point, right? And like, if that's not a result that we as a society want to see, then it would seem like there would need to be like a fourth node in there or something that introduces some other effect in there to shift that equilibrium point. And the only thing I can think of is it becomes like, I mean, this maybe sounds terrible, but in a way, if you, in this case, you're giving people what they want, and this is what happens, you know? Like, so sometimes there's that role for an editorial injection of content or something, where it's like, maybe it, you know, you would have to come up with a way where some sort of like editorial or you know, expert could say, even though here are the sort of naturally ranked by the algorithm results, we're going to inject this content in there anyways, but not in a paid way. You know, that it just becomes some sort of like further problematic, you know, money-driven kind of thing. But I don't know, I mean, how do you decide who does that? And who's the expert in all that?
It's a great question, and it's one that people are really struggling to answer now. I'll say, like, these companies, the search engine companies, are usually private. And so sort of introducing any sort of government regulation can be a great challenge and can directly drive down revenue. So if you're seeing more of what you don't want to see, you're less likely to be on the page, and any advertiser is able to see that. I don't know the answer. I know arguments that companies have made against having that be the case. Mark Zuckerberg last week was saying, like, it's not Facebook's job to verify the factual accuracy of any given campaign. Users should be able to do that, but right, as we've discussed, they might be blinded from doing that. Any regulation is going to worsen the experience for one, if not all, of the three nodes in this. So I don't have the answers, but it's a good question to think about. Yeah.
Which do you think, quality or relevance, is the more problematic measure that you're using?
Definitely relevance. It's relied on more heavily, but if we only looked at quality and, let's say, direct relevance, so really how similar is your search to the thing that's going to appear, without considering other variables, and specifically without considering what a lot of other people are looking at, that could really change the nature of what becomes current events. Because if you see all of the things that are happening and not only one or two of the main stories, that would be a lot better for seeing different sides of the story. I will say, like in Google's credit, they have said that in their like top news section when you search for something, they'll like go back to the same like Wall Street Journal, New York Times, a few standard what's it called? Institutions, sure, news institutions, and they won't consider these variables. But I mean, that doesn't hold up for like as you're scrolling down. But quality is actually, I think, the best thing. If you're not only seeing one article linking to one sort of chain of articles, but really like in general, people are linking opposing positions and like positions and trying to get a full scope of an article, then we might see things which are more evenly balanced. Yeah.
I have a question/comment that kind of adds on to that. So
Yes.
a lot of what you talked about was going through the relevance and how people clicking on stuff kind of affects that relevance score. And when you talked earlier about the quality almost had that same cycle where it's people or articles linking to each other, which has that same feedback loop. But I do think there's something to be said of the quality of content should be independent of the links that it has. So you could say that this content makes users feel a certain way, or this content is factual, or this content has these sorts of opinions in it, and baking those things into a quality score might help break this cycle if you have a more objective measure of quality.
Interesting. So, I mean, yeah, how would you suggest? I think the question of linking is good. Like in general, you would like to think, in the case, let's say the case of research papers, if there's one paper that continually is quoted, you would think that one is reputable. But as you said, right, a biased article could link to a biased article that supports them.
So is there something that we can do as users, like if we are aware of this kind of like hype, like tsunami with stories, like when we're searching it, like to get not hyped results, basically? Like.
So it seems to be no. You can be really conscious of your cookies, so sort of what websites are able to keep track of where you've been, and keep reading past like the first results. And if you see something that's strongly in favor of any one side or uses really extreme rhetoric, be conscious. I mean, I think that's like a general life rule. Never trust anyone that's too impassioned, or just be thorough. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So we all just came from a talk from New York Times that they're building, personalized recommendation systems now, and it's a little scary because it's like human boom scenario is going to get worse. I'm curious if you were to hypothetically talk to the data science team, do you have a prescription for how those systems should be built? Is there a way to build these without these pitfalls?
So we would have to really restructure search engines in general, because if only the New York Times did it, they would lose out. And the Wall Street Journal or other companies that have also personalized methods of getting you to see their hot topics, right, that company would lose. So we would need to bring a lot of people to the table. I think really changing the way that if ads weren't like based off of demographic, but were really only based off of search terms, I think that would be a lot better. And yeah, in the back.
What if you have certain images that are impacting users and multiple social groups? How does that affect those companies?
So I'll just repeat the question. Like, what happens if you're in multiple social groups and you're not only seeing the information from one, but from a collection? So I think that would be great. And that would probably confuse algorithms. I mean, hopefully we have friends with varying opinions, so that would be excellent, but I know it's not always the case. But I mean, there's no way to formalize that, like make everyone have friends with different opinions, but I think that would be great. Digitally and in general, right, have a diverse group. Yeah.
Yes, I'm just curious, you mentioned before that, when you do a search and once you use impassioned words, like for example, very upset, or that actually raises the likelihood that you'll get the click. It almost seems like a possible solution would be take an algorithm and actually remove the high emotion words and try to focus more on facts. I mean, what happens a lot on the internet is that people's opinions get higher and the results maybe the facts do. If you write the algorithm where you actually pull out the impassioned words and just try to focus on the facts, maybe that would actually make the results a little more relevant.
So yeah, like Big Brother is definitely an approach that different societies have taken. Like, okay, let's just take away what this person said. It seems to not be America's model, sort of a freedom of speech thing, but there's some really interesting research papers, if you want to come over afterwards, I can show you, that actually try to write programs that can figure out when something is clickbait. So whether it's like really stream language that's like you would only use it to attract users, or seeing if the title actually correlates to the information. Like, is the title delivering factually on its claim in the title? But I don't know that I am like advocating for a less freedom of speech based society. Okay, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much everyone for coming. I hope you enjoy your day.